The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as 17-year-old Raj walked home from his part-time job at the local grocery store. His shoulders ached from stocking shelves all afternoon, but he couldn't complain. The extra money would help his mom with the bills this month. The familiar streets of his suburban neighborhood were quieter than usual, save for the occasional car passing by and leaves crunching under his feet. As he approached the neighborhood park, voices caught his attention, not the usual cheerful chatter of children playing, but something different, something that made him pause mid-step. Through the gathering dusk, he could see a group of teenagers gathered near the park benches, where an elderly couple sat huddled together. "Look at how slow they're moving," one of the teens sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe they forgot where they parked their walker." Laughter erupted from the group, and Raj felt his stomach twist. The elderly couple, who he recognized as the Patels from 3 streets over, seemed to shrink into themselves, clutching their grocery bags closer. Mr. Patel, who Raj knew had suffered a stroke last year, was struggling to stand up, while Mrs. Patel tried to support him with trembling hands. Time seemed to slow down as Raj watched the scene unfold. His mind flashed back to his own grandparents back in India, who he hadn't seen in years. He thought about how they'd taught him to always stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. His grandfather's words echoed in his head, "Your character is defined by how you treat those who cannot defend themselves." Without thinking twice, Raj adjusted his backpack and walked straight toward the group. His heart hammered in his chest. These weren't just any teenagers, they were seniors from his high school, including Dev Singh, the star quarterback known for his quick temper and influential family connections. "Hey!" Raj called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "Why don't you try picking on someone your own age?" The group turned, surprise flickering across their faces before settling into amused smirks. Dev stepped forward, towering over Raj by several inches. "Well, if it isn't the grocery store stock boy. This isn't any of your business, kid." "Actually, it is," Raj replied, stepping between the group and the elderly couple. "These are my neighbors, and they deserve respect." Mr. Patel taught math at the community college for 30 years before his stroke, and Mrs. Patel volunteers at the homeless shelter every weekend. "What have you done lately besides make fun of people who can't fight back?" The atmosphere shifted. Some of the teens shuffled uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Dev's face reddened, but before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "Is everything all right here?" All heads turned to see Officer Chen, who had been patrolling the park, walking toward them. The group of teens quickly dispersed, with Dev shooting Raj a look that clearly said this wasn't over. Raj turned his attention to the Patels, helping them gather their groceries. "Let me walk you home," he offered, picking up their bags. As they walked slowly down the street, Mrs. Patel patted his hand with tears in her eyes. "Beta, you didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Those boys, they could make trouble for you." "It's okay, Auntie," Raj replied, using the respectful term he'd grown up with. "My grandfather always said that staying silent in the face of wrong is the same as supporting it." What Raj didn't know was that someone else had witnessed the entire incident. A black SUV with tinted windows had been parked across the street, its occupant watching the scene unfold with great interest. As Raj helped the elderly couple home, the SUV pulled away silently into the growing darkness. That night, as Raj finished his homework, his phone buzzed with messages from classmates. Word had spread quickly about his confrontation with Dev and his friends. Some praised his courage, while others warned him about Dev's reputation for holding grudges. Raj tried to push the worried thoughts aside as he helped his mom prepare dinner, but he couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring consequences he wasn't prepared for. His mother, noticing his distraction as they ate their simple meal of dal and rice, reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Something on your mind, Beta?" Raj considered brushing it off but instead found himself telling her everything. As he finished, he expected her to be worried, maybe even angry that he'd potentially made trouble for himself. Instead, she smiled with pride. "You know," she said, stirring her tea thoughtfully, "your father would have done the same thing. He always believed that true strength isn't about physical power, it's about having the courage to stand up for others, even when it's difficult." The mention of his father, who had passed away 5 years ago, made Raj's throat tight. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. His mother continued, "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." Later that night, as Raj lay in bed, he thought about the events of the day. The fear in Mrs. Patel's eyes, the anger in Dev's face, and that mysterious black SUV he'd noticed parked across the street, it had seemed out of place in their modest neighborhood. Sleep came fitfully as his mind raced with possibilities of what the next day might bring. What he didn't realize was that his simple act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life but the lives of many others in ways he could never have imagined. The mysterious black SUV would return the next day, bringing with it revelations that would shake their small community to its core. As the night deepened and the neighborhood fell silent, Raj finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that his story of standing up for what was right was about to become much bigger than he could have ever anticipated. Tomorrow would bring surprises that would test his courage, challenge his convictions, and ultimately reveal that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. The next morning arrived with an unusual chill in the air. Raj woke up earlier than usual, his dreams having been filled with shadowy figures and mysterious vehicles. As he got ready for school, he could hear his mother in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing his favorite breakfast, aloo paratha. The familiar smell usually brought comfort, but today his stomach was tied in knots. Walking to school, Raj noticed something different about his neighborhood. The black SUV he'd spotted yesterday was parked at the corner of his street. His pace quickened as he passed it, and from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of someone inside writing something in a notebook. The windows were too darkly tinted to make out any features, but the mere presence of the vehicle sent a shiver down his spine. At school, whispers followed him through the hallways. Some classmates patted him on the back, calling him brave, while others avoided eye contact completely. Dev and his friends were nowhere to be seen, which somehow felt more unsettling than facing their anger. During lunch break, his best friend Amit rushed to his table, looking worried. "Dude, you won't believe what I just heard," Amit said, sliding into the seat next to him. "Dev's father is furious about yesterday. Apparently, he's on the school board, and..." Before Amit could finish, the school principal's voice crackled over the intercom, "Raj Kumar, please report to the main office immediately." The cafeteria fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch as Raj stood up, his legs feeling like lead. As he walked toward the office, he could hear the murmur of conversation starting up again behind him. But when he reached the main office, he found something unexpected. Instead of the principal, 2 well-dressed individuals were waiting for him. One was a distinguished-looking woman in her 50s, wearing a crisp business suit, and the other was a younger man who seemed to be her assistant. "Mr. Kumar," the woman said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Reena Sharma from the National Youth Leadership Foundation. May we have a moment of your time?" Raj's confusion must have shown on his face because Dr. Sharma smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, you're not in any trouble. Quite the opposite, actually." They led him to a conference room, where Raj noticed a familiar notebook on the table, the same one he'd glimpsed in the black SUV that morning. Dr. Sharma explained that their foundation had been conducting a nationwide search for young individuals who demonstrated exceptional moral courage and leadership qualities. "Yesterday, one of our observers witnessed your interaction at the park," she said. "We've been watching various communities across the country, looking for genuine instances of youth standing up for what's right, especially in challenging circumstances." Raj's mind was spinning. So, the black SUV? Our observation team, Dr. Sharma confirmed. We needed to verify that your action wasn't a one-time occurrence. We spoke with the Patels this morning, and they told us about your regular visits to check on them, helping with their groceries, and even teaching Mr. Patel to use video calls to connect with his grandchildren. Just then, there was a knock on the door. The principal entered, followed by Dev and his father, Mr. Singh. Raj's heart sank, but Dr. Sharma's presence seemed to change the entire dynamic of the situation. Mr. Singh, looking considerably less intimidating than Raj had imagined, cleared his throat. My son has something he'd like to say. Dev stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but sincere. I'm sorry about yesterday. My grandfather had a stroke last year too, and when I got home and thought about it, well, I was being a real jerk. The guys and we were just showing off, but that's no excuse. The tension in the room dissolved as Dev extended his hand to Raj. As they shook hands, Dr. Sharma watched with approval. She then revealed the real purpose of their visit. The foundation was offering Raj a full scholarship to any university of his choice, along with a position in their prestigious leadership program. But that's not all, she continued. We want to help you expand your impact. The foundation is prepared to fund a community project of your choice to help senior citizens in your neighborhood. Raj felt overwhelmed. Just yesterday, he'd been worried about helping his mom with bills, and now. His thoughts immediately went to the Patels and other elderly residents in his community who struggled with daily tasks. Could we? He began thoughtfully, could we create a youth volunteer program? Something that connects teens with senior citizens who need help? Not just for physical tasks, but for teaching technology, providing companionship. Dr. Sharma beamed. That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we're looking for. Sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can create the biggest ripples of change. As the meeting concluded, Raj found himself walking through the school hallways with a dazed expression. The same students who had been whispering about him earlier now looked at him with genuine respect. Dev and his friends, rather than being antagonistic, were already talking about volunteering for the new program. That afternoon, as Raj walked home, the black SUV was gone, but something else had taken its place, a sense of possibility he'd never felt before. He stopped by the park where everything had started and sat on the same bench where the Patels had been. The autumn leaves were still falling, but now they seemed to dance with promise rather than uncertainty. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. The Patels just called. They told me everything. Your father would be so proud, Beta. So proud. As Raj looked up at the golden afternoon sky, he realized that sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as small moments of courage. The mysterious black SUV hadn't brought trouble as he'd feared, instead, it had brought the chance to create real change in his community. And it all started with a simple decision to stand up for what was right. News of the National Youth Leadership Foundation's project spread through the community like wildfire. Within days, Raj found himself at the center of a transformation that was bigger than anything he could have imagined. The local community center had offered their space for the youth volunteer program, and applications from both teenagers and senior citizens were pouring in. One rainy Saturday morning, Raj sat at his kitchen table surrounded by papers, trying to match volunteers with seniors based on their interests and needs. His mother brought him a cup of chai, watching proudly as he worked. The living room had become an impromptu office, with sticky notes covering one wall and a whiteboard filled with schedules and ideas. Look at this one, Mom, Raj said, holding up an application. Mrs. Chen from the corner store, she wants to teach traditional Chinese calligraphy to anyone interested. And here's Uncle Patel offering to tutor math. It's becoming so much more than just helping with groceries and technology. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. It was Dev, carrying a laptop and looking excited. You won't believe this, he said, setting up his computer. My father showed the program proposal to some of his business contacts. 3 companies want to sponsor us. We're talking real money for equipment, transportation, everything." Raj's eyes widened. The initial funding from the foundation had been generous, but with corporate sponsorship, they could expand their reach even further. As they discussed possibilities, another visitor arrived, Dr. Sharma, carrying a thick folder and wearing her characteristic warm smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, accepting the cup of chai Raj's mother offered. "But there's something important we need to discuss." She spread several newspapers on the table. Their local story had caught the attention of major media outlets. "You're becoming a symbol, Raj," she explained. "Other communities are asking how they can start similar programs. The foundation thinks it's time to take this nationwide." The weight of the opportunity settled over the room. Dr. Sharma continued, "We want to fly you to Chicago next week to speak at a youth leadership conference. Over 500 students from across the country will be there." Raj felt his throat go dry. Public speaking? On a national stage? The thought made his hands shake slightly. Dev, noticing his friend's nervousness, spoke up. "He won't be alone. The whole team should go, show how the community came together to make this work." Before they could discuss further details, Raja's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Mrs. Patel was at the hospital, her husband had fallen and needed help. Without hesitation, Raj grabbed his jacket. At the hospital, they found Mr. Patel with a sprained ankle and minor bruises. But the incident highlighted a crucial gap in their program: emergency response and medical support. As Raj sat with the Patels, waiting for discharge papers, an idea began to form. "What if," he said slowly, "we created an emergency network? Quick response teams of volunteers who could be there within minutes when a senior needs help." Dr. Sharma, who had accompanied them to the hospital, was already taking notes. The foundation could help develop a mobile app for this. Something simple that seniors could use to call for assistance with just one button. The next few days became a whirlwind of activity. Dev, who had discovered a passion for project management, coordinated with local tech companies to develop the app. The community center's basement was transformed into a training facility where medical students from the nearby university taught basic first aid to volunteers. But with growing success came unexpected challenges. Some people in the community were resistant to change. At a town hall meeting, concerns were raised about liability issues and the responsibility being placed on young volunteers. Others worried about background checks and safety measures. Raj stood at the podium, facing the crowded room. His nervousness from earlier in the week had transformed into quiet confidence. "I understand your concerns," he began, his voice steady. "They're the same ones I had when we started. But look around this room. Every senior here wearing a green badge has been helped by our program. Every teenager wearing a blue badge has learned valuable life skills while serving their community." He gestured to where Mr. Patel sat, his ankle wrapped but healing. "When I stood up in that park 2 weeks ago, I wasn't thinking about creating a movement. I was just doing what my parents taught me, showing respect and helping those who needed it. This program isn't about liability forms and background checks, though we have those too. It's about rebuilding the connections that make a community strong." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, people began to stand and applaud. Even the most vocal critics seemed moved by the sincerity in Raja's words. After the meeting, as volunteers helped clean up the community center, Dr. Sharma pulled Raj aside. "That speech," she said, "was exactly what we need for the Chicago conference. But I have to warn you, there's something else coming. Something bigger than any of us expected." She handed him a letter. The Presidential Service Award Committee had taken notice of their program. They weren't just interested in recognizing Raja's initiative, they wanted to use it as a model for a National Youth Service Corps. As Raj walked home that evening, he passed the park bench where everything had started. A group of teenagers was sitting there, helping an elderly man set up his new smartphone. They waved to Raj as he passed, and he couldn't help but smile. His phone buzzed with a message from Dev. Channel 5 wants to do a feature story tomorrow. Ready to be famous? Raj typed back, only if we can show how everyone made this happen, not just me. At home, he found his mother on the phone with his grandparents in India, excitedly telling them about the latest developments. She covered the mouthpiece and whispered, "They're booking tickets to come for the presidential ceremony." Later that night, as Raj updated the program's social media pages, which had gained thousands of followers, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The mysterious black SUV that had once seemed threatening had led to opportunities he never imagined possible. But more importantly, it had shown him that one person's courage could inspire an entire community to become better. What he didn't know was that the biggest challenge, and the most incredible opportunity, was still to come. As he fell asleep that night, the rain tapped gently against his window, like the universe itself was applauding the changes taking place in their small corner of the world. The Chicago Youth Leadership Conference loomed ahead, and Raj found himself facing an unexpected challenge: stage fright. Standing in front of his bedroom mirror, practicing his speech for the 100th time, he felt his confidence wavering. The words that had flowed so naturally at the town hall meeting now seemed to stick in his throat. "You're thinking too much, Beta," his mother said from the doorway, where she'd been watching him quietly. "Tell them your story the way you told me that first night. Speak from your heart." The morning of their flight to Chicago, the community gathered at the local coffee shop to wish them well. The Patels were there, along with dozens of seniors and teenage volunteers. Mrs. Chen from the corner store had brought good luck charms for everyone on the team. Dev's father, Mr. Singh, had arranged for a luxury bus to take them to the airport. "Remember," Mr. Patel said, pulling Raj aside, "you've already done the hard part. You stood up when it wasn't easy. Everything else is just sharing what you learned." On the plane, Dr. Sharma briefed the team about what to expect. The conference center will be packed with students, educators, and community leaders from across the country. "But there's something else you should know." She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. "The First Lady will be attending your presentation." The news sent a ripple of excitement and nervous energy through the group. Dev, who had been working on a video presentation, immediately pulled out his laptop to make last-minute adjustments. "We need to show them how the emergency response app works," he said. "That's what makes our program unique." Their first view of Chicago took their breath away. The foundation had booked them into a hotel overlooking Lake Michigan, and the city skyline glittered like jewels in the late afternoon sun. But there was no time for sightseeing. They had a rehearsal scheduled in an hour. The conference center was massive, with state-of-the-art facilities and a main hall that could seat thousands. As they walked through the empty space, their footsteps echoing, Raj felt overwhelmed by the scale of what they were about to do. This wasn't just about their community anymore, they were about to share their idea with the entire nation. During rehearsal, everything that could go wrong did. The microphone kept cutting out, the video presentation glitched, and Raj stumbled over his words. By the end of the session, everyone was frustrated and tired. Back at the hotel, unable to sleep, Raj went down to the lobby where he found Mrs. Patel's good luck charm in his jacket pocket, a small brass elephant that had belonged to her grandmother. As he turned it over in his hands, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Couldn't sleep either?" It was an elderly woman sitting in one of the lobby chairs, working on a crossword puzzle. She introduced herself as Rose, a retired teacher from Minnesota. When Raj explained why he was there, her eyes lit up. "You know what the problem is with society today?" she asked, setting aside her puzzle. "Everyone's so focused on their phones that they've forgotten how to really see each other. What you're doing, connecting young people with seniors, that's not just about helping with groceries or teaching technology. It's about rebuilding the bridges between generations." Their conversation lasted for hours. Rose shared stories about her own struggles with technology and loneliness after her husband passed away. Her grandson had taught her to use video calls, and it had changed her life. Sometimes, she said, the smallest acts of kindness can save someone from drowning in isolation. The next morning, as Raj prepared for the presentation, he thought about Rose's words. When they took the stage, he set aside his prepared speech and spoke from his heart. He talked about Mr. Patel's determination to learn video calling so he could see his grandchildren. He shared stories about Mrs. Chen teaching calligraphy to teenage volunteers, and how those same teenagers had created a digital archive of her traditional recipes. This program isn't just about young people helping seniors, he explained, his voice strong and clear. It's about what we learn from each other. Every time a teenager helps an elder with technology, they receive something priceless in return: wisdom, stories, and the kind of life lessons you can't find in any textbook. The video presentation played perfectly this time, showing their emergency response app in action. Dev demonstrated how seniors could request help with a single button press, and how the app matched them with nearby volunteers based on the type of assistance needed. When they finished, the applause was thunderous. The First Lady approached the stage, tears in her eyes. "This is exactly what our country needs right now," she said. "Not just a program, but a movement to rebuild connections in our communities." As they left the stage, Raj spotted Rose in the audience, giving him a thumbs up. Later, at the reception, dozens of students and community leaders approached them, eager to learn how they could implement similar programs in their own cities. Dr. Sharma was beaming as she gathered the team. "The foundation has decided to expand the program nationally. We want to establish training centers in every major city, with your community serving as the model. Raj, we'd like you to head the Youth Advisory Board." The news was overwhelming, but Raj's thoughts immediately went to his responsibilities back home. "I still have school," he said. "And our local program." "That's the beauty of it," Dr. Sharma explained. "You can do most of the work remotely, and we'll provide everything you need to balance your studies with this role. The foundation believes that young leaders should be supported, not overwhelmed." As the team celebrated their success that evening, Raj's phone buzzed with messages from home. The community had gathered at the coffee shop to watch the live stream of their presentation. Mrs. Patel sent a video of everyone cheering, and his mother's message simply read, "Your father is smiling down on you today, Beta." Looking out over the Chicago skyline that night, Raj thought about how much had changed since that autumn evening in the park. What had started as a simple act of standing up for what was right had grown into something that could change lives across the country. But even as he dreamed about the program's national expansion, he knew that its heart would always be in those small, everyday moments: a teenager helping an elder cross the street, a grandmother sharing her stories, a community coming together to take care of its own. What Raj didn't know was that their success in Chicago was about to open doors he never imagined possible, and that the next challenge would test not just his leadership skills, but everything he believed about the power of community and connection. The return home from Chicago felt like stepping into a different world. News vans lined their quiet suburban street, and reporters waited eagerly as Raj and his team stepped out of the airport shuttle. But instead of heading straight to the media circus, Raj made an unexpected turn, straight to the Patel's house. "Beta, everyone is waiting for you at the community center," Mrs. Patel said as she welcomed him in, the smell of freshly baked cookies filling the air. "Why are you here first?" Raj smiled, pulling out the brass elephant charm from his pocket. "Because none of this would have happened without you and Uncle. Besides, the media can wait, cookies can't." As they sat in the Patel's cozy living room, Raj shared stories from Chicago, including his late-night conversation with Rose. Mr. Patel listened intently, his eyes twinkling. "You know," he said, "sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand it at the time." The next few weeks became a whirlwind of activity. The National Youth Service Corps initiative, inspired by their program, was taking shape. Conference calls with community leaders from across the country filled Raj's evenings, while his days were split between school and managing the local program's explosive growth. Dev had become an unexpected tech pioneer, working with Silicon Valley developers to expand their emergency response app. "We're adding AI capabilities," he explained during a team meeting. "The app will learn from each interaction, making the matching between seniors and volunteers even more effective." But with national attention came unexpected challenges. One morning, Raj arrived at the community center to find an elderly man sitting alone in the corner, tears streaming down his face. His name was Mr. Lee, and he'd traveled all the way from San Francisco after seeing their story on the news. "My children are too busy for me," he explained, his voice breaking. "I thought maybe your program could help me too." The situation hit home hard. Their success had created hope, but also highlighted how many people were still struggling with loneliness and isolation. That night, Raj couldn't sleep, his mind racing with the weight of responsibility. His mother found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., nursing a cup of chai. "You're carrying too much on your shoulders, Beta," she said, sitting beside him. "Remember what your father used to say? A leader's job isn't to carry the weight alone, but to show others how to lift together." Those words sparked an idea. The next day, Raj called an emergency meeting with Dr. Sharma and the foundation team. "We're thinking about this wrong," he said. "Instead of trying to expand our program to help everyone, we need to teach communities how to build their own programs." The idea resonated. Within days, they were developing a toolkit that any community could use to start their own intergenerational support network. Dev's tech team created an open-source version of their app that could be customized for local needs. The Patels began recording video tutorials sharing their perspective as program beneficiaries. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. Mr. Singh, Dev's father, arrived at one of their planning sessions with exciting news. His business connections had led to a partnership with a major tech company that wanted to provide free tablets and internet service to seniors in participating communities. "This isn't charity," Mr. Singh explained. "They see the value in connecting generations. Happy, connected seniors become customers who can shop online, video chat with family, and engage with digital services." The initiative was gaining momentum when a new challenge emerged. A competing organization, seeing the success and funding flowing into the program, launched a smear campaign. They claimed the program was exploiting seniors for publicity and questioned the safety of letting teenagers work with vulnerable elderly people. The allegations hurt, but the community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Seniors and their families flooded social media with stories of how the program had changed their lives. Local news stations ran features showing volunteers in action, highlighting the rigorous training and safety measures in place. The turning point came during a national news interview. The reporter, hoping to stir controversy, asked Raj about the allegations. Instead of becoming defensive, he invited the camera crew to follow him for a day. They filmed as he helped Mrs. Chen reorganize her store while she taught him traditional Chinese characters. They captured Mr. Patel leading a math study group where senior volunteers helped students prepare for college entrance exams. They showed teenage volunteers learning to cook traditional recipes from elderly community members, preserving cultural heritage while building friendships. "This program isn't about exploitation," Raj explained on camera. "It's about recognizing that every generation has something valuable to teach and something important to learn. We're not just helping seniors, we're rebuilding the kind of community connections that used to exist naturally." The piece went viral, spawning a social media movement where people shared stories of intergenerational friendships and support. The hashtag Bridging Generations began trending nationwide. As the program's first anniversary approached, the community center organized a special celebration. The walls were covered with photos showing the program's evolution, from that first confrontation in the park to the Chicago conference and beyond. But the most powerful display was a simple collection of handwritten notes from both seniors and volunteers, sharing how the program had impacted their lives. During the celebration, Rose, the woman Raj had met in Chicago, made a surprise appearance. She had started a similar program in her Minnesota community and came to share their success stories. "You didn't just create a program," she told Raj. "You started a movement that's bringing hope to people who thought they were forgotten." Later that evening, as the party wound down, Raj found himself back at the park bench where everything had started. The autumn leaves were falling again, but this time they seemed to dance with purpose, each one carrying the promise of new connections waiting to be made. His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Sharma. White House called. They want to discuss taking the program international. Ready for the next big step? Raj looked up at the stars, thinking about how a single moment of courage had led to all of this. But before he could reply to Dr. Sharma's message, another text came through, a photo from Dev showing a group of teenagers helping seniors learn to use virtual reality headsets at the community center. "Sometimes," Raj typed back, "the biggest changes start in the smallest places. Let's see where this journey takes us next." What he didn't know was that the international expansion would bring challenges and opportunities that would test not just their program, but the very foundations of how societies view and value their elderly members. The next chapter would take them far beyond their suburban community, but the heart of their mission would remain the same, one simple act of kindness at a time. The White House meeting room felt worlds away from the suburban park where Raj's journey had begun. Sitting around a massive oak table with government officials, international delegates, and Dr. Sharma, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in the past year. "Your program has caught the attention of several countries," the Secretary of State explained, gesturing to the diverse group of ambassadors present. "They're particularly interested in how you've managed to bridge not just generational gaps, but cultural ones as well." A delegate from Japan spoke up, describing their country's rapidly aging population and the increasing isolation of elderly citizens. Similar concerns were echoed by representatives from Germany, Brazil, and India. Each nation faced unique challenges, but the core issue remained the same: disconnection between generations. As Raj listened, he remembered something Mrs. Chen had told him while teaching him calligraphy. "Every culture has its own way of showing respect to elders, but sometimes these traditions get lost in modern life. Your program helps people remember what's important." Taking a deep breath, Raj stood up to address the room. "Before we discuss international expansion, I'd like to share a video call with you." On the large screen, the familiar faces of his local community appeared, seniors and teenagers gathered at the community center, ready to share their experiences. Mr. Patel spoke about how the program had given him purpose after his stroke. A teenage volunteer described learning traditional recipes from an elderly Korean woman, while another shared how helping seniors had inspired her to pursue a career in healthcare. Their stories transcended cultural and linguistic barriers, touching everyone in the room. "This isn't just an American program that we want to export," Raj explained. "It's a framework that each community can adapt to their own cultural context. The technology and structure provide the foundation, but the heart of the program comes from local connections." The proposal resonated. Plans were made to launch pilot programs in 5 countries, with Raj's community serving as a training hub for international coordinators. But as the meeting concluded, an unexpected challenge emerged. "There's one condition," the Secretary of State said. "We need you to take a gap year before college to help implement these international programs. You'll be appointed as a special youth ambassador." The opportunity was incredible, but Raj hesitated. Taking a gap year meant delaying college, leaving his local program, and being away from his mother and community for extended periods. The weight of the decision felt overwhelming. Back home, the community rallied around him. His mother, though tearful at the thought of him traveling so far, reminded him of his father's words about making a difference in the world. The Patels offered wisdom from their own experience of leaving India for better opportunities. Dev, who had been quietly working on something, revealed his latest innovation. "We've developed a virtual reality platform," he explained, demonstrating how seniors could take virtual walks with volunteers from anywhere in the world. Distance doesn't have to mean disconnection anymore. As Raj struggled with his decision, an unexpected visitor arrived at their door, Rose from Minnesota. She'd heard about his dilemma and had flown in to share her perspective. "When I met you in that hotel lobby in Chicago, you were worried about speaking to a national audience," she reminded him. "Now look at what you've accomplished." Sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the most important changes. That evening, Raj sat in the park, watching families walk by. A teenage girl was helping an elderly man with a walker, both laughing at some shared joke. The scene reminded him of why he'd started this journey in the first place. His phone buzzed with a video call from Japan. A group of high school students there had already started adapting his program for their community. They showed him their version of the emergency response app, modified to include features specific to Japanese culture and needs. "We're calling it Kakahashi, it means bridge in Japanese," they explained proudly. "Would you help us develop it further?" The pieces began falling into place. With the foundation support, they could establish regional training centers where local communities could learn to adapt the program while preserving their cultural identity. The gap year wouldn't mean abandoning his local program, it would mean helping it grow in ways he never imagined. Raj made his decision. At the next community meeting, he announced his plans to accept the ambassador role, but with a twist. "I'll travel to help launch international programs," he said, "but our community will remain the heart of everything we do. We'll use technology to stay connected, and every new program will be paired with a mentor community here in the States." The response was overwhelming. Seniors offered to help train international coordinators through video calls. Teenage volunteers stepped up to manage local operations. Dev announced he would defer his college acceptance to continue developing their technology platform. Mr. Singh, who had been quietly supportive throughout, made another surprising announcement. His company would fund scholarships for international students to spend a semester training in their community. "This way," he said, "we're not just exporting a program, we're creating a global network of understanding." As preparations for the international launch began, Raj received a package from Mrs. Patel. Inside was a journal with a note, "To record your journey, Beta. Remember, you're not just building bridges between generations anymore, you're building them across oceans." The first test of their international approach came sooner than expected. A small village in rural India had adapted their program to include traditional storytelling sessions where elderly villagers shared local history and folklore with young people. The stories were recorded and shared through their app, preserving cultural heritage while creating connections. In Brazil, a group of teenagers had modified the emergency response system to include community gardens where seniors taught traditional farming techniques. The program wasn't just bridging generations, it was helping communities become more sustainable. These successes brought new challenges. Cultural differences meant that what worked in one country might need significant adaptation in another. Technology access varied widely between regions. But each challenge led to innovations that made the program stronger. One evening, as Raj packed for his first international trip, his mother found him staring at his father's old passport. "He always wanted to make the world a better place," she said softly. "He just didn't know how. You found a way, Beta." The next morning, as Raj prepared to leave for Japan, the community gathered at the airport. The Patels, Mrs. Chen, Dev, and dozens of others came to see him off. But the most touching moment came when he spotted a familiar black SUV in the parking lot. Dr. Sharma stepped out, smiling. "Remember when this all started? We were looking for young leaders who could make a difference. We never imagined finding someone who could change the world." As his flight took off, Raj looked down at his community growing smaller below. In his carry-on bag was Mrs. Patel's brass elephant charm, his father's passport, and a journal ready to be filled with new stories. What had started as a simple act of kindness in a park was about to become a global movement for change. What he didn't know was that the biggest challenges, and the most remarkable transformations, were still to come, as his program prepared to touch lives in ways no one had ever imagined possible. Japan's cherry blossoms were in full bloom when Raj arrived in Tokyo. The delicate pink petals reminded him of the falling autumn leaves back home where his journey had begun. His first meeting was at a small community center in a quiet neighborhood, where elderly residents sat in neat rows, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hope. Through an interpreter, Raj shared his story, but it was the video messages from seniors back home that truly captured their attention. Mrs. Chen speaking in fluent Mandarin about how the program had given her a new sense of purpose. Mr. Patel demonstrating how video calls had reconnected him with family across continents. The universal language of human connection needed no translation. After the presentation, an elderly Japanese man, Mr. Tanaka, approached Raj. In our culture, we have a concept called ikigai, finding purpose in life, he explained through the interpreter. Many of our elderly have lost their ikigai. Perhaps your program can help them find it again. That conversation sparked an idea. Working with local teenagers and seniors, they adapted the program to incorporate traditional Japanese concepts. The emergency response app was modified to include not just practical help, but also cultural exchange opportunities. Elderly artisans could offer workshops in traditional crafts, while young people could help modernize traditional businesses. Back at his hotel that evening, Raj received an urgent video call from Dev. "You need to see this," his friend said excitedly. He shared his screen, showing how their app was being used in unexpected ways. In Brazil, a group of teenagers had created virtual reality tours of their city guided by elderly residents' memories. In Germany, senior citizens were teaching young immigrants about local history and customs, bridging not just generational but cultural gaps. The program is evolving on its own, Dev explained. Every community is adding something unique. We're not just creating a network, we're building a global tapestry of connections. The next few months became a whirlwind of travel and discovery. In a small village in India, Raj watched as teenage volunteers helped elderly women digitize their traditional recipes and medicinal knowledge. In Brazil, he visited a community garden where seniors taught sustainable farming practices passed down through generations. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In some communities, cultural differences created unexpected challenges. In others, technology access remained a significant barrier. Each obstacle required creative solutions and local adaptation. During a particularly challenging week in Berlin, where privacy concerns had stalled the program's implementation, Raj received a package from home. Inside was a handmade scrapbook from the community center. Photos, letters, and stories from seniors and volunteers filled its pages. A note from Mrs. Patel caught his eye. "Remember, Beta, sometimes the smallest stones create the biggest ripples." Inspired, Raj organized a global video conference, connecting program participants from different countries. Seniors from Japan shared their ikigai stories with German elders. Brazilian teenagers demonstrated their virtual tours to excited Indian students. The language barriers melted away as they found common ground in their shared experiences. The breakthrough moment came when Mr. Tanaka from Tokyo showed everyone his modified version of the emergency response app. He'd added a feature called Wisdom Exchange, a platform where seniors could offer their life experiences and traditional knowledge to young people seeking guidance. "In my culture," he explained through subtitles, "we believe that every elderly person is a living library. But modern life has made it hard to access this library. This program helps us open these books again." The idea resonated across cultures. Soon, communities worldwide were adapting the Wisdom Exchange feature to their own traditions. In India, it became a platform for preserving oral histories. In Brazil, it helped document indigenous knowledge about the rainforest. In Germany, it facilitated conversations about historical events from personal perspectives. As the program grew, something unexpected began to happen. Communities that had never interacted before started forming connections. A group of Japanese seniors began teaching origami to children in Brazil via video calls. German teenagers helped Indian elders sell their traditional crafts online. The program wasn't just bridging generations, it was crossing borders and cultures. Back home, Dev and the team had turned the community center into a global coordination hub. The walls were covered with screens showing live feeds from programs around the world. Mr. Singh had expanded the technology donation program internationally, ensuring that even remote communities could participate. One morning, Raj received news that would change everything. The United Nations was interested in incorporating their program into their global initiatives for aging populations. But they didn't just want to support the program, they wanted to create a new youth ambassador program, with Raj's project as the model. During a conference call with Dr. Sharma and the foundation team, Raj shared his vision for the next phase. "We've proven that this isn't just about helping seniors or giving teenagers volunteer opportunities," he explained. "It's about reimagining how different generations can support each other in a connected world." The UN proposal would provide resources to expand the program to 50 more countries, but it came with a new challenge. They wanted Raj to help design a training program for future youth ambassadors. This meant not just sharing what had worked, but teaching others how to adapt the program to their own cultural contexts. As he considered this new opportunity, Raj received a video message from home. His mother had organized a special gathering at the park where everything had started. The camera panned across familiar faces, the Patels, Mrs. Chen, Dev, and dozens of seniors and teenagers who'd been part of the original program. "Look what you started, Beta," his mother said, tears in her eyes. "Your father always said that true change happens when people remember their connection to each other. You've helped people remember." That evening, sitting in his hotel room in Tokyo, Raj opened Mrs. Patel's journal and began to write. He wrote about Mr. Tanaka and Ikigai, about Brazilian virtual tours and German privacy concerns. He wrote about the challenges they'd faced and the unexpected solutions they'd found. But mostly, he wrote about the moments of connection he'd witnessed, the spark in an elderly person's eyes when they realized they had something valuable to teach, the excitement of young people discovering wisdom in unexpected places, the joy of barriers breaking down between cultures and generations. As cherry blossoms floated past his window, Raj received another video call, this time from a group of teenagers in Kenya who wanted to start their own program. Looking at their eager faces on the screen, he realized that what had started as a single act of kindness in a park had grown into something far beyond what anyone could have imagined. What he didn't know was that the UN initiative would lead to even more extraordinary developments, as the program prepared to enter its most ambitious phase yet. The next chapter would challenge not just how communities connect, but how the world views the relationship between generations in an increasingly connected global society. 1 year after the UN initiative began, Raj stood at the podium in the United Nations General Assembly Hall, looking out at an audience that represented the future of global connection. 500 youth ambassadors from around the world, each selected for their commitment to bridging generational gaps in their communities, waited to hear his words. But instead of giving a formal speech, Raj started with a simple story. "A year ago, an elderly man in Tokyo taught me about Ikigai, finding one's purpose," he began. "Today, I want to share how that lesson has echoed across the world." The massive screens behind him came to life, showing live feeds from different communities around the globe. In a small village in Kenya, teenage volunteers were helping elders record traditional tribal knowledge using tablets. In Argentina, senior citizens were teaching young people traditional dance steps through virtual reality programs. In Thailand, elderly craftsmen were streaming live workshops, passing down ancient artistic techniques to eager young apprentices worldwide. What started in a suburban park has become a global movement, Raj continued, not because we had the perfect solution, but because we remembered something essential. Every generation has something valuable to teach, and everyone has something important to learn. The presentation was interrupted by an unexpected video call. It was Mr. Patel, speaking from the original community center back home. Behind him stood dozens of people who had been part of the initial program. "Beta," Mr. Patel said, his voice strong and clear, "when you stood up for us that day in the park, you didn't just help two old people. You reminded an entire community of its power to care for each other. Now, look how far that reminder has spread." The camera panned to show the community center's transformation. What had once been a simple gathering space was now a global connection hub. Screens showed live links to sister centers around the world. Elderly volunteers were conducting virtual cultural exchange sessions. Teenage tech experts were teaching senior citizens from different countries how to use new communication tools. Dev, who had been working behind the scenes, stepped forward to announce their latest innovation. "We've created something new," he explained, demonstrating a platform that used artificial intelligence to break down language barriers in real time. Now, a grandmother in rural China can share her stories with children in Mexico, all in their native languages. As the presentation continued, success stories poured in from around the world. A group of seniors in South Africa had started a digital library of indigenous knowledge, preserved through interviews conducted by local teenagers. In Iceland, elderly fishermen were teaching sustainable fishing practices to young environmental activists through virtual reality experiences. But the most powerful moment came when Rose, the woman Raj had met in that Chicago hotel lobby, took the stage. Now the head of the International Council of Elder Wisdom, she shared how the program had evolved beyond its original scope. "We're not just connecting generations," she explained. "We're preserving humanity's cultural heritage, one story at a time. Every elder who shares their knowledge, every young person who learns from them, they're all part of a living, growing archive of human experience." The UN Secretary-General announced the program's next phase, the creation of a global wisdom library, a digital platform where the knowledge and experiences shared through the program would be preserved for future generations. But more than just an archive, it would be an active, growing resource, continuously enriched by new connections and exchanges. As the ceremony concluded, Raj received a message from his mother. She had sent a photo of his father's old passport, along with a new entry in Mrs. Patel's journal. "Your father dreamed of a world where people remembered how to care for each other," she wrote. "You've helped build that world, Beta, one connection at a time." Back at the community center, where everything had started, a special celebration was being held. The Patels, Mrs. Chen, and other original participants gathered to witness the program's latest milestone. Through a massive screen, they were connected to similar gatherings in community centers across the globe. Mr. Singh, whose technology contributions had helped make it all possible, made a surprising announcement. His company was establishing a foundation to provide lifetime support for the program, ensuring that it would continue to grow and evolve for generations to come. "But the real achievement," he said, looking at Raj, "isn't in the technology or the global reach. It's in remembering that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can spark the biggest changes." As the celebration continued, Raj found himself back at the familiar park bench where he had first stood up against bullying. A group of teenagers was sitting there, helping an elderly couple learn to use the latest version of their app. They waved to him, not as a global ambassador or program founder, but simply as another member of their connected community. His phone buzzed with messages from youth ambassadors around the world, each sharing how the program had transformed their communities. A young girl in rural India had helped preserve her village's traditional medicine knowledge. A teenager in Brazil had created a network of community gardens managed by elderly experts. A boy in Australia had helped Aboriginal elders share their Dreamtime stories with the world. As the sun set on this remarkable day, Raj opened the journal Mrs. Patel had given him so long ago. Its pages were now filled with stories from around the world, tales of connection, wisdom shared, and bridges built across generations and cultures. On the last page, he wrote a simple message: every journey begins with a single step, every change starts with a single action, and every connection starts with a single moment of kindness. The real power lies not in the technology we create or the programs we build, but in our willingness to see and value each other, across generations, across cultures, and across all the boundaries that seem to divide us. The mysterious black SUV that had once seemed so threatening was now displayed in the community center's museum section, a reminder that sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as challenges. Beside it stood a simple plaque that read, "From a moment of courage to a movement of connection, every action matters." As night fell, Raj looked up at the stars, the same stars that shone over every community now connected through their program. What had started as one teenager standing up for an elderly couple had grown into a global network of understanding, support, and shared wisdom. But more importantly, it had reminded the world of a simple truth, that in the end, we all need each other, and the strongest communities are those that remember to care for every generation. The story wasn't ending, it was just beginning a new chapter, as each new connection, each shared story, and each act of kindness continued to ripple out into the world, creating waves of change that would be felt for generations to come.